Clarabelle stood outside the Red Lantern Saloon with flour on her sleeves, rain in her hair, and every eye in Canyon Ridge measuring her like a mistake no man had been desperate enough to keep. The failed bride letter lay torn near her boot, kicked there by the storekeeper who said an overlooked baker was not worth the postage. Across the street, a Canyon cowboy named Jonah Reed had come expecting only bread for his motherless nephew and a quiet ride home before sundown. He did not expect to see Clara bend to gather her shame, nor the corner of an old leather satchel showing beneath the saloon steps, heavy with a secret that could ruin or save them both. Before this frontier story unfolds, comment the country you are watching from. If you believe one kind cowboy can change a forgotten woman's life, subscribe so you do not miss the next romance. By noon, Canyon Ridge had already decided what Clarabelle was worth. The town sat where the red cliffs broke open into a dusty pass, with a single street pressed between the canyon wall and the dry wash. Wagons leaned at hitching rails. Mules flicked their tails under a hard white sky. The bakery smoke drifted thin and sweet from the back of the general store. But nobody praised the woman who had risen before dawn to coax loaves out of poor flour and a tired oven. They only saw what they wished to see. They saw Clara's plain brown dress mended twice at the elbow. They saw her hands strong from kneading dough, not soft enough for a bride. They saw the little flour streak that always found her cheek, no matter how carefully she washed. They saw a woman who had arrived in Canyon Ridge 6 months earlier with one carpetbag, one letter of promise, and a name no one had cared to remember until there was gossip attached to it. The letter had come from Silas Crane, a widower who owned 2 dry acres beyond town, and had wanted a wife who could cook, scrub, and keep quiet. Clara had answered because hunger made a woman answer hard things. She had believed, with the fragile hope of someone long overlooked, that work might grow into respect and respect might someday warm into companionship. But Silas had taken one look at her when the stage arrived and changed his mind before she had even set down her bag. Too thin, he had said, not quietly. Too tired looking. I asked for a woman, not a shadow. That was how Canyon Ridge first met Clarabelle, standing in road dust with a marriage promise folded in her hand and no home to go to. Mrs. Harrow, who ran the general store, had taken Clara on because the bakery room needed labor and cheap hands were cheaper than kind hearts. Since then, Clara had slept in the flour loft, baked before sunrise, served customers who spoke around her, and endured the town's habit of making her small. On that noon, Mrs. Harrow dragged the old shame out again. She stood on the store porch with Clara's bride letter held high between 2 fingers, as if it were spoiled meat. Her face was narrow and pale beneath a stiff black bonnet, and her voice carried beautifully when she wished to wound. I found this in the flour ledger, Mrs. Harrow called. Hidden like a thief hides a card up his sleeve. Clara stood at the bottom of the steps, holding a basket of day-old rolls. The saloon doors across the street had stopped swinging. Men leaned out under the awning. Women paused with parcels against their hips. A boy dropped a peppermint stick in the dust and forgot to pick it up. That letter is mine, Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but not weak. Quiet was the only way she had learned to survive. Mrs. Harrow smiled, as if Clara had given her the very answer she wanted. Yours? Then perhaps you can explain why a woman rejected from one marriage keeps old promises near my accounts. Looking for another fool to trap? A few men laughed, not loudly. Canyon Ridge liked cruelty best when it could pretend to be proper. Clara felt heat crawl up her throat. She could smell yeast, horse sweat, spilled whiskey, and the coming storm pressed behind the canyon. She wanted to take the letter, fold it back into a private wound, and walk until the town became nothing but dust behind her. But she had 23 cents in her pocket, no horse, and nowhere that hunger would not follow. I put it in the ledger because the roof leaked over my trunk, she said. It was only paper I meant to keep dry. Paper, Mrs. Harrow snapped it open. "This paper says Silas Crane agreed to marry you before he saw what kind of bargain had been sent." The laughter came harder this time. Clara's fingers tightened around the basket handle. The rolls inside shifted, their crusts whispering against the cloth. Silas Crane himself stood near the blacksmith's, his thumbs hooked in his suspenders, his face red and smug. "I was misled," he announced. "A man has the right to refuse damaged goods." No one corrected him. That was the part Clara would remember later. Not the insult, not Mrs. Harrow's bony fingers, not even the laughter. She would remember the silence of decent people who looked away because shame was easier to witness when it belonged to someone else. Then Mrs. Harrow tore the letter once across. Clara flinched. It was foolish. The promise had been worthless from the start. Still, that paper had held the last proof that once, for a short while, someone had written her name as if she might be wanted. The second tear came slower, more deliberate. "Mrs. Harrow," Clara whispered. The storekeeper dropped the torn pieces into the dust. "You can gather your keepsakes after you finish delivering those rolls. And when you return, we will discuss the missing coins from my till." Clara's head lifted. "Missing coins? $6.40, Mrs. Harrow said. "Gone since morning. I suppose an unwanted bride must save for the next advertisement somehow." The street stirred with ugly interest. "I did not take your money." "Then empty your pockets." Clara's face went still. There were things poverty took from a woman piece by piece. First comfort, then choice, then privacy, and at last, if the world was hungry enough, dignity. She set the basket down carefully. Her hands shook only once before she forced them steady. From one pocket, she drew a handkerchief, clean but patched. From the other, 23 cents, 2 dimes, 3 pennies, all warmed by her body. Mrs. Harrow came down the steps and counted the coins in Clara's palm. "Not all of it, then." Someone chuckled. Clara closed her fingers around the little money she had and looked across the street toward the saloon, because she could not bear to look at faces anymore. The red lantern sign creaked in the wind. Beneath its steps lay broken glass, cigar ends, and damp clay where last night's rain had not dried. The place always seemed to breathe out trouble. A wagon rattled into town from the canyon road then, drawn by a dun horse with a white blaze. The driver was a broad-shouldered man in a dust-colored coat, his hat brimmed low, his jaw dark with a day's beard. Beside him sat a small boy of 5 or 6, wrapped in a blanket, though the day was warm. Clara knew the man by sight, though not by speech. Jonah Reed owned the High Canyon Ranch north of the pass, where the wind carved through stone and cattle grew tough on scrub grass. He came to town twice a month, bought flour, salt, nails, coffee, and sometimes molasses if the boy was with him. He never lingered, never played cards, never let the town pull him into its talk. People said his brother and sister-in-law had died in a flash flood 2 years back, leaving him with the child. People said Jonah had been engaged once before grief made him stone. People said many things about quiet men, because quiet gave gossip an empty room to fill. Jonah climbed down from the wagon. The boy remained seated, watching with solemn dark eyes. Mrs. Harrow noticed him and changed her voice at once. "Mr. Reed, I'll be with you shortly." Jonah did not answer her. His gaze rested on the torn paper in the dust, then on the coins in Clara's fist, then on Clara herself. For one frightening second, Clara wished he would look away like everyone else. He did not. "Those rolls paid for?" he asked. Mrs. Harrow blinked. Are they all?" I asked if they were paid for. The storekeeper's mouth pinched. "They belong to my shop." Jonah reached into his coat and took out a coin. "I buy the basket." "They are not for sale that way. They are now." His voice stayed level, but something in it settled the street. "My nephew is hungry." The boy in the wagon lowered his eyes as if embarrassed by needing anything. Mrs. Harrow hesitated. Money had always been the one language she respected. Jonah placed the coin on the porch rail and picked up the basket himself. Clara stepped back. "Mr. Reed, I can carry that." "I know," he said. Those two words struck her strangely. Not soft, not pitying, just certain. He turned toward the wagon, then stopped near the saloon steps. The wind pushed dust against his boots, lifting one torn piece of Clara's letter. It skidded beneath the bottom step. Jonah bent to catch it. That was when his hand brushed against something half buried in the mud. A leather satchel, old, dark, wedged beneath the saloon steps where loose boards hid shadow. He paused only a moment, long enough for Clara to see the brass clasp, the torn strap, and the edge of a seal stamped into the leather. Then the saloon door slammed open, and a man shouted from inside. "Who's crawling around my steps?" A thick man with a scar through one eyebrow lurched onto the porch. Rafe Dutton. Clara knew him. Everyone knew him. He dealt cards, collected debts, and had once told Clara a woman with no family ought to be grateful for any man's attention. Jonah straightened, the torn paper in one hand, the basket in the other. "Wine took something under there," he said. Rafe's eyes moved from Jonah to the shadow under the step. For the first time that day, his face lost color. Clara saw it. Jonah saw it too. And suddenly the shame in the street changed shape. It was still there, still burning around Clara. But beneath it something else had opened like a crack in canyon stone. Something hidden, something dangerous, something worth more than $6.40. Jonah Reed had not come to town to involve himself in a woman's humiliation. He told himself that twice while loading salt and coffee into the wagon. He told himself a third time while Mrs. Harrow hovered at the store doorway, sharp with the need to explain herself into innocence. But the explanation did not sit right. "She is a useful worker," Mrs. Harrow said, tying brown paper around a parcel of beans. "I gave her shelter when no one else would. There are girls who repay charity with gratitude. And then there are girls who get ideas." Jonah lifted a sack of flour onto his shoulder. "What kind of ideas?" Mrs. Harrow's eyes narrowed. "Ideas above their station." He carried the flour to the wagon without answering. Little Caleb sat among the supplies with a roll in both hands, eating carefully, as if the bread might vanish if he enjoyed it too quickly. He had been thin since the fever last winter, and though the doctor said he was mending, Jonah still watched every bite like a prayer. "Uncle Jonah," Caleb said softly. "Was the lady bad?" Jonah looked across the street. Clara Bell knelt in the dust near the saloon, gathering the torn pieces of her letter. Nobody helped her. A few watched from doorways. Silas Crane laughed with two men by the blacksmiths. Rafe Dutton stood on the saloon porch, pretending not to watch the step where the satchel lay hidden. "No," Jonah said. "I don't believe she was." "Then why did they talk like that?" "Because people were afraid of needing mercy themselves," Jonah thought. "Because a lonely town could be meaner than a winter storm. Because shame was a rope folks liked to throw around another person's neck so they would not feel it tightening on their own." He said only, "Some people talk before they see." Caleb considered this with a child's brave patience. "She made good bread, she did." Jonah returned to the store for nails, but his attention kept pulling toward the red lantern. He had seen fear before. Cattle sensed lightning before a man heard thunder. Horses rolled their eyes before earth shifted. Rafe Dutton had looked at that hidden satchel the way a thief looks at a locked door when another man finds the key. When Jonah came out again, Clara was gone. The torn letter was gone too. He found her behind the store, where the bakery door opened onto a narrow yard, cluttered with ash barrels and stacked crates. She was pumping water into a tin basin, her sleeves rolled, her head bent. The skin beneath her eyes looked bruised with tiredness. "I bought the rolls," Jonah said. She turned quickly. "You did not need to do that." "No." The answer made her look at him more carefully. He removed his hat. The gesture felt old-fashioned and awkward in the ash yard. But his mother had taught him that a woman deserved courtesy even when the world forgot, especially then. My nephew liked them. A little of Clara's guardedness loosened. He is a sweet boy. He is a hungry boy. They are often the same thing. Jonah almost smiled, but the day was too heavy for it. Mrs. Harrow says you stole from her till. I did not. I believe you. She went still with both hands on the pump handle. The water continued to drip into the basin, each drop bright and brief. You should not say that, she murmured. Not where someone might hear. Truth does not sour because someone hears it. In Canyon Ridge, it does. There was no bitterness in her voice. That made it worse. She spoke like a woman who had tested hope and found it dangerous. Jonah glanced toward the street. Rafe doesn't trouble you. Clara's fingers tightened. He troubles anyone who owes him money. You owe him. No. Mrs. Harrow does, I think, or Silas, or half the town. She swallowed. I keep my head down. I saw a satchel under the saloon steps. Her eyes lifted. She had seen it too. Jonah did not move closer. A skittish horse taught a man that kindness could feel like pressure if offered too fast. Did you know it was there? No. Did Rafe? I believe he feared you did. The bakery door opened behind them. Mrs. Harrow stepped out, carrying a ledger against her chest. Clara, there are pans to wash. Mr. Reed, if you have business, conduct it in the store. My business is here, Jonah said. With my baker, with Miss Bell. The storekeeper's eyes flashed at the courtesy of the name. Clara seemed to hear it too. Her chin lifted a fraction. Mrs. Harrow looked between them, calculating. How charming. But Miss Bell is under obligation to me. Clara's face tightened. Jonah looked at her. What obligation? Mrs. Harrow answered first. Room, board, and protection from destitution. Those things cost. How much? How much? Clara shook her head once, small and urgent. Mr. Reed. How much? Jonah repeated. Mrs. Harrow's mouth curved. $32. Clara's color drained. It was 18 last week. Interest, Mrs. Harrow said. And the missing till money unless returned. Jonah had known men like her. Folks who built cages out of arithmetic. He reached into his coat, felt the folded bills from his cattle sale, and stopped. He could pay it. He could set money on the barrel and watch Clara walk free by sundown. But rescue given wrong could become another humiliation. It could turn a woman from accused thief into purchased charity in a town hungry for ugliness. He looked at Clara instead. Do you want work? Mrs. Harrow scoffed. She has work? I mean fair work. My ranch needs bread twice a week, meals for a child, and help with preserves before winter. I pay wages, room included if wanted, separate from the house if preferred. Clara stared as if he had spoken another language. Mrs. Harrow slapped the ledger shut. You cannot simply take my baker. I can offer employment. She owes me. Then write the amount proper and give her a signed account. I'll have the sheriff look it over. That changed the air. Mrs. Harrow's nostrils flared. Sheriff Vale has better things to do than meddle in women's deaths. Then he can say so. From inside the bakery came the smell of scorching sugar. Clara turned in alarm. The biscuits, she said. She rushed inside. Jonah followed as far as the doorway and saw a room hot as August, with black iron ovens, flour dust in the air, and rows of uneven shelves. Clara moved through it quickly, saving what could be saved. She did not weep. She did not tremble now. Work steadied her. Her hands knew what to do when the world did not. Caleb appeared at Jonah's side, having climbed down from the wagon without permission. His face brightened at the warm smell. Clara saw him and softened. You must not stand near the oven, sweetheart. It bites worse than a dog. Caleb stepped back obediently. Do you make pies? When I have fruit? We have apples at the ranch, he said. They are little and sour. Those make fine pies if you know how to talk to them. How do you talk to apples? Brown sugar, patience, and a little cinnamon if your uncle can afford it. Caleb looked at Jonah with sudden urgency, as if cinnamon had become a matter of survival. Jonah felt something old and frozen shift in his chest. Not warm, exactly. Not yet. More like the first crack in river ice. Mrs. Harrell pushed past him. Out, all of you. This is not a charity hall. Clara set the save tray down. Her cheeks were flushed from the oven. Flour clung to a loose curl near her temple. She looked tired and trapped and still somehow unbroken. Jonah put his hat back on. My offer stands, Miss Bell. I leave at sundown. She looked toward Mrs. Harrow, then toward the little loft ladder where her trunk must be. Fear passed over her face, followed by something harder. Courage, Jonah thought, did not always look like a gun drawn in a street. Sometimes it looked like a woman counting what it would cost to stand upright. I will think on it, Clara said. Mrs. Harrell laughed. Think quickly. Girls with no references should not be choosy. Jonah stepped out before anger could make him careless. But he did not return to the wagon. Instead, he crossed to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Vale was a lean older man, with spectacles low on his nose and a coffee cup balanced on a stack of wanted notices. He listened without interrupting as Jonah told him about the public accusation, the changing debt, Rafe Dutton's reaction, and the satchel beneath the saloon steps. At the mention of the satchel, Vale set down his cup. Leather, you say? Brass clasps. Yes. The sheriff opened a drawer and took out a faded notice. 3 years ago, a Wells Fargo agent vanished near this canyon with payroll bonds and mining certificates meant for the rail spur. Folks blamed Apaches at first, then floods, then nobody. Money was never found. Jonah felt the day narrow around him. You think that satchel is connected? I think Rafe Dutton rode with men who knew that agent. Vale stood slowly. And I think if that bag is under his saloon, Miss Bell might have stumbled close to more than town gossip. Outside, thunder rolled beyond the canyon rim. When Jonah and the sheriff reached the red lantern, the step was broken. The satchel was gone. Clara made her choice in the rain. It came hard after sundown, washing the canyon dust into red streams that ran along the street and pooled beneath the hitching rails. The town lamps blurred behind sheets of water. Horses turned their rumps to the wind. The red lantern glowed like a bad ember in the storm. Clara stood in the bakery loft with her carpet bag open on the floor. Everything she owned fit inside it: 2 dresses, a comb with missing teeth, a Bible with her mother's name written in the front, a tin of yeast she had kept alive across 3 states, and the torn braille letter wrapped in cloth, though she hated herself for saving it. Below, Mrs. Harrell argued with someone in the store. Clara could hear only pieces through the rain. Gone by morning, debt follows. Dutton will want. Clara packed faster. She had not agreed to Jonah Reed's offer because he was a man. A man's offer had stranded her before. She had agreed because he had not tried to buy gratitude from her. He had said work, wages, separate room. He had asked what she wanted when everyone else spoke as if wanting were not for women like her. Still, fear moved with her as she climbed down the ladder. Mrs. Harrell waited at the bottom. You walk out tonight, you walk out with theft on your name. Clara held the carpet bag in front of her. My name has carried worse lies than yours. The storekeeper's face hardened. He will tire of feeding you. He is not feeding me. He is hiring me. For now. Clara's hand tightened around the handle. Then for now is farther than here. She stepped around Mrs. Harrell and walked into the storm. Jonah's wagon waited beneath the livery awning. Caleb slept on the bench wrapped in a quilt. Jonah stood beside the horse, rain dripping from his hat brim. He looked at Clara's bag, then at her face. Ready? No, she said truthfully. A faint, grave softness touched his eyes. Climb in anyway. The ride to the Canyon Ranch took 2 hours in storm dark. The road climbed through red rock walls and cedar breaks, with lightning showing the world in sharp white pieces. Clara sat beside Caleb, one hand braced on the wagon rail, the other holding her bag. Jonah drove without complaint, his shoulders steady against the rain. Once the wagon lurched in a washout and Clara grabbed for Caleb, Jonah's arm shot back at the same time, shielding them both. "Easy," he said to the horse. Then, quieter, to Clara. "You all right?" "Yes." It was not entirely true, but it was truer than it had been in town. The ranch appeared as a dark shape against darker cliffs, a low house with a stone chimney, a barn, a small bunkhouse, and corrals silvered by rain. A lantern burned in one window. The place looked plain and weather-beaten, but not cruel. Jonah carried Caleb inside. Clara followed, dripping on the threshold. The main room held a long table scarred by use, a cook stove, shelves with tin plates, a braided rug worn thin, and a child's wooden horse lying on its side near the hearth. The air smelled of smoke, leather, and loneliness. Jonah laid Caleb on a narrow bed in a side room. When he returned, he found Clara still standing by the door. "You can come in," he said. "I am wet." "So is the floor." She almost smiled, but did not trust it. He showed her the back room off the kitchen. It was small, with a cot, a washstand, a peg for clothes, and a square window facing the apple trees. "Separate, as promised. My brother built this for hired help," Jonah said. "Door latches from inside. I sleep across the house. Caleb's room is between." The latch mattered. He said it without making her thank him for understanding why. Clara set her bag down. "What time do you rise?" "Before light." "Yes, so do I. You can start with breakfast if you wish, or sleep late after the ride." "I would rather work." He nodded, as if that made sense. The first morning, she made biscuits from hard flour, fried apples with a little brown sugar, and coffee strong enough to hold up a spoon. Caleb came to the table barefoot, hair wild, eyes still sleepy. He stopped when he saw the plate. "Is it Sunday?" he asked. Clara set a biscuit before him. "No, we have company." "No." He looked at Jonah. "Then why is breakfast happy?" Jonah's hand paused around his cup. Clara turned quickly to the stove, pretending to adjust the fire. Some wounds were too tender to look at straight. That day she learned the ranch by its needs. The hens had gone half wild. The pantry held beans, cornmeal, salt pork, and 3 jars of peaches gone cloudy. The apple trees were indeed small and sour. The kitchen pump stuck unless lifted just right. Caleb's shirts needed mending. The breadboard was cracked. Jonah had been keeping the place alive by force, but not by comfort. Comfort required a different kind of courage. By the 3rd day, Clara had yeast bubbling in a crock near the stove. By the 5th, bread rose under a clean cloth. By the 7th, Caleb followed her from kitchen to yard, asking questions about everything. "Why do you punch dough?" "Teach it. Humility. Dough's sin. Only when it refuses to rise. Dough cows like bread. Not unless your uncle wants me dismissed." Caleb took this seriously and stopped sneaking crusts toward the corral. Jonah watched from a distance more often than Clara realized. He watched Clara kneel to show Caleb how to shape rolls. He watched her save bacon grease for beans, mend a torn cuff so neatly his brother's old shirt looked cared for again, and walk through the barn with no fear of the milk cow who had bitten 2 hired men. She did not fill the house with noise. She filled it with attention. That was harder on Jonah than noise would have been. For 2 years, he had kept grief in order by keeping life bare. A table could not ache if nobody expected it to be warm. A room could not feel empty if a man never remembered fullness. Caleb needed food, shelter, schooling, and boots. Jonah provided those. Love he gave clumsily, like a man carrying water in cracked hands. Clara saw the cracks without naming them. One evening, a cold rain returned. Jonah came in late from the upper pasture with blood on his sleeve. Clara saw it before he could turn away. "You are hurt?" said I. "Sit. It's nothing. Then it will take nothing to clean." He looked at her, surprised by the firmness. Caleb sat at the table, drawing crooked horses on slate. Clara had stew simmering, bread cooling, and lamplight around her shoulders. The room felt so unlike the house. Jonah knew that for a moment he obeyed simply because he did not know what else to do. Clara rolled up his sleeve. The cut across his forearm was long but shallow. She washed it with boiled water and tied it with a strip of clean linen. Her fingers were careful, not timid. "You have done this before," he said. "My father was a baker. My mother took in washing. My brothers fought with every boy in Missouri. Someone was always bleeding. You have family there." The question slipped out before he could stop it. Clara's hand slowed. "Not anymore." He did not press. She tied the knot and tucked the end. "Keep it dry." "Yes, ma'am." The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but near enough that Jonah noticed the room brighten. A few days later, the shared secret came back with a rider from town. Sheriff Vale arrived near dusk, hat dusty, horse lathered. Jonah met him by the barn. Clara stood on the porch, Caleb tucked behind her skirt. "Dutton's gone," the sheriff said. "Cleared out sometime after the storm." Jonah's jaw tightened. "With the satchel, maybe. But he left blood on the saloon floor and one dead man in the alley. Drifter named Abner Pike. Folks say Pike had been asking about a leather bag." Clara's fingers closed around the porch rail. The sheriff looked at her gently. "Miss Bell, did Dutton ever speak to you about anything hidden near the saloon?" "No." "Did you see anyone else near those steps before Mr. Reed found the bag?" Clara thought of that morning. Mrs. Harrell on the porch, Silas at the blacksmith's, Rafe watching, a freight wagon, a boy with peppermint, faces blurred by shame. Then one memory sharpened. "There was a man in a gray coat," she said. "He stood by the rain barrel. I thought he was watching Mrs. Harrell, but he kept looking at the lower step. When Mr. Reed bent down, the man crossed to the alley." Sheriff Vale and Jonah exchanged a look. "Railroad agent?" Jonah asked, "or someone pretending?" Vale turned back to Clara. "You might have seen more than you know." Clara's stomach tightened. "Will they come here?" "Dutton might, if he thinks you can identify who else wanted that bag." Caleb pressed closer to her. Jonah saw it. The child's instinctive trust, Clara's hand lowering to his shoulder without thought. The way she was afraid, and still made herself a shelter for someone smaller. Kindness, Jonah realized, was not softness. It was a blade honed inward first, cutting down fear enough to do what needed doing. "I'll keep watch," he said. The sheriff nodded. "And keep Miss Bell close." That night, the storm cleared. Stars opened above the canyon, sharp as frost. Clara stepped onto the porch after Caleb slept, and found Jonah sitting with a rifle across his knees. "I brought coffee," she said. "Thank you." She sat on the far end of the bench, leaving space enough for propriety and fear and all the things neither of them had named. For a long while, they listened to coyotes calling beyond the wash. "I did not steal from Mrs. Harrow," Clara said. "I know. You cannot know." Jonah looked at the dark yard. "I know what a thief looks like when something hidden is found. I saw Dutton's face. I saw yours when they tore that letter." Her breath caught softly. He regretted speaking so plainly, but she did not leave. "I hated that letter," she said after a while. "Still, when she tore it, I felt like she had torn the foolish girl who believed it. Believing is not foolish. It is when belief leaves you standing in a street with everyone laughing." Jonah's voice lowered. "Then the shame belongs to them." Clara looked at him. The lamplight from the window touched only half his face, leaving the rest carved in shadow. He looked like the canyon itself, hard and guarded, but something living ran somewhere deep. You say things as if they are simple, she whispered. No, I say them because they are hard. The space between them did not close. Not that night, but it changed. Canyon Ridge did not forgive Clara for surviving it. At first, the town pretended not to care. Then customers began asking Mrs. Harrell why her bread had gone flat. Then the stage driver carried word that folks up the canyon were buying loaves from Jonah Reed's ranch instead of the general store. Then Sheriff Vale questioned Silas Crane about his friendship with Rafe Dutton, and Silas answered badly. By the end of the second week, resentment traveled faster than wagons. Mrs. Harrell arrived at the ranch in a hired buggy with Silas beside her and 2 town elders behind, on horseback. Jonah was in the lower pasture. Clara saw them from the kitchen window and felt the old street rise under her feet again. Dust and staring faces and torn paper. Caleb looked up from the table where he was practicing letters. Are they bad people? Clara wiped her hands on her apron. They are people who want something. That can be bad. Yes, sir, she said softly. It can. She stepped onto the porch before they could knock. Mrs. Harrow's gaze moved over Clara's clean apron, the swept porch, the drying apples strung under the eaves. Her mouth tightened as if order itself offended her when Clara made it. You left owing money, she said. I asked for an account. You did not provide one. Silas climbed down, trying to look righteous and only managing sour. You also left with property not yours. Clara's pulse thudded. I took my clothes, my Bible, and my yeast tin. Mrs. Harrow held up a paper and knowledge of stolen holdings. A satchel disappeared from the saloon after you were seen near it. Now Dutton is gone, and so is a fortune in bonds. Convenient. Clara gripped the porch rail. So that was the shape of it. If Dutton could not be found, if the hidden fortune frightened men with secrets, then the unwanted baker would serve as a place to throw blame. You accused me of $6, Clara said. Now a fortune. Which lie do you prefer? One elder frowned at the sharpness, but Jonah's voice came from behind the buggy before anyone answered. I prefer none. He walked up from the pasture, carrying a coil of rope, dust on his boots, sweat darkening his shirt at the collar. He did not hurry. That made him more dangerous somehow. Mrs. Harrow lifted her chin. Mr. Reed, this is town business. This is my porch. Silas snorted. She is not your wife. The words struck the air too hard. Clara felt them. Jonah did too. Caleb appeared in the doorway behind her. Jonah's eyes flicked to the boy, then back to Silas. She is under my roof by honorable employment, Jonah said. Speak accordingly. Mrs. Harrow smiled thinly. Employment. Is that what you call it when a lonely man takes in a rejected bride? Clara went cold. Jonah took one step forward, but Clara moved first. No, she said. Everyone looked at her. She came down one porch step. Her voice shook at the edge, but hell, you do not get to make my work dirty, because your oven is cold. You do not get to call me thief, because your books will not bear looking at. And you do not get to speak filth over a house where a child can hear you. The elder on the left shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Harrow's face darkened. Pride looked strange on you. Perhaps because you have only seen me hungry. The words surprised even Clara. They had risen from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been quiet too long. Jonah looked at her then, and what she saw in his face nearly undid her. Not pity, not rescue. Pride. Silas pointed toward her. She is trouble. I said it the first day. You said she was too thin. Jonah replied. That was not judgment. That was appetite complaining. One of the elders coughed into his glove. Mrs. Harrow snapped. The town council will hold an auction for Dutton's saloon and goods to recover debt. If that satchel appears, it belongs to lawful creditors. If Miss Bell hid it, I hid nothing, Clara said. Then come to town tomorrow and say so publicly. Jonah's eyes narrowed. Why? because if she refuses, the story writes itself. After they left, dust settling behind the buggy, Clara stood in the yard with her hands numb. Jonah turned to her. "You do not have to go." Yes," she said. "I do. They want a crowd, I know. They want to put you back where they last saw you. I know that too." Caleb came out and wrapped his arms around her waist. She closed her eyes briefly and placed a hand on his hair. "I cannot live hiding from every street where someone laughs," she said. Jonah had no answer because she was right. That night, wind struck the house in long, restless waves. Jonah checked the barn twice and found no sign of riders. But the horses were uneasy. At midnight, the dog barked once, then went silent. Jonah took the rifle and stepped into the yard. A shadow moved near the apple trees. "Halt," Jonah called. The shadow ran. Jonah fired into the air, not at the man. Clara appeared at the doorway with a lantern, her face pale. The light caught a scrap of gray cloth snagged on a branch. By morning, they found the bakery door forced open. Not the ranch bakery, but the old smokehouse Jonah had let Clara use for extra loaves. Flour spilled across the floor. Dough overturned. Her yeast crock smashed. On the worktable lay one of the torn pieces of her bride letter. The words "agreed to marry" still visible. Caleb cried when he saw the broken crock. Clara did not. She knelt, gathered the pottery pieces, and held them in her apron. Jonah's anger came so quietly that it frightened him. "I should have shot lower." "No," Clara said. "They came here." "Yes, they touched what was yours." Her eyes lifted, wet but fierce. "Then we will bake without it." He stared at her. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "My father used to say yeast is stubborn. It lives where you feed it. There might be enough left in the cloth. There might not. Then I will start again." The town auction took place the next afternoon under a sky bruised purple with coming weather. The Red Lantern's doors were chained open. Tables had been dragged into the street and loaded with bottles, chairs, mirrors, card tables, lamps, and trunks from the rented rooms above. Men came for bargains. Women came to watch judgment performed in public. Clara arrived in Jonah's wagon wearing her clean brown dress and a white collar she had washed late into the night. Caleb sat between them, solemn with protective importance. Jonah had asked Mrs. Alvarez, their nearest neighbor, to watch him, but Caleb had refused. "She stood with me when I was scared," he said. "I can sit with her." No argument had survived that. The crowd quieted when Clara stepped down. Mrs. Harrow stood near the auction table with Silas and one elder. Sheriff Vale watched from the saloon porch. His expression told Jonah this was not only an auction, it was a net. "Miss Bell," Vale said, "you came." "I said I would," Mrs. Harrow's voice carried. "Then state before witnesses that you have no knowledge of the missing satchel." Clara looked at the crowd. She saw the same faces that had laughed. Some looked eager, some ashamed, some merely curious. Which felt worst of all? "I did not take it," she said. "I did not hide it. I saw it only when Mr. Reed found the strap beneath the step." "And yet, you left town that night," Silas called. "I left because I was offered honest work." A likely story. Jonah stepped forward, but Clara touched his sleeve. "A small touch? A warning? A request? Let me stand." He stopped. The auction began. Items sold cheap. Rich Dutton's mirror went to the barber, his poker table to a ranch hand. A locked trunk from the upstairs room was carried out last. Its hinges rusted, initials burned faintly into the lid. AP Sheriff Vale's gaze sharpened. "Open it," someone called. The trunk belonged to the dead drifter Abner Pike. Vale broke the lock. Inside lay clothes, a pistol, old newspapers, and a packet of letters tied with black string. No satchel, no bonds, no fortune. But beneath the lining was a small ledger. Vale opened it and went still. A shot cracked from the alley. The ledger flew from his hand. The crowd screamed and scattered. Horses reared. Caleb cried out. Jonah grabbed Clara and shoved her behind the auction table as a second shot splintered the saloon post. From the alley emerged Rafe Dutton, gaunt, wild-eyed, pistol in hand. "Vale," he shouted. "Leave what ain't yours." The hidden fortune was no longer just rumor. It had come armed. Everything after the first shot happened in pieces Clara would carry all her life. Caleb's small hands slipping from hers. Jonah turning toward the gunfire instead of away. Mrs. Harrow crawling behind a barrel, her black bonnet fallen in mud. Sheriff Vale bleeding from the shoulder, but reaching for the ledger. Rafe Dutton standing in the alley, with rain starting to fall around him. His face twisted by a fear bigger than greed. "Bring me the book," Rafe shouted, "or I drop the boy." The street froze. Caleb stood near the wagon, separated from Clara by overturned chairs and panicked bodies. Rafe's pistol had shifted toward him. Jonah stopped moving. Clara could see the choice strike him like a bullet. The ledger lay near the saloon step, not 10 feet from Jonah. The rifle was in the wagon, too far. The sheriff was wounded. The crowd had become useless. If Jonah lunged, Rafe might fire. If no one moved, Rafe might fire anyway. Clara rose before she knew she had decided. "Take me," she called. Jonah's head snapped toward her. "Clara, no." Rafe's eyes found her. Recognition flared, ugly and relieved. "The baker. You wanted someone who saw the satchel," Clara said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Calm, as if she were discussing bread. "I saw it." The child saw nothing. Rafe laughed once. "And why would I trade?" "Because I know the man in the gray coat." It was not entirely true. She had seen him. She did not know him. But Rafe did not know how much she knew, and fear makes liars believe other liars. The pistol shifted from Caleb toward Clara. Jonah moved 1 inch. Rafe saw and cocked the hammer. "Stay, cowboy." Clara stepped into the open. Rain dotted her collar. Her heart beat so hard she wondered that no one heard it. "Let Caleb go behind the store," she said. "Then I will tell you where the gray-coated man went." Rafe's mouth worked. He was thinner before, desperate, one sleeve dark with old blood. The hidden fortune had not made him rich yet. It had made him hunted. "Boy!" he barked. "Move!" Caleb stood frozen. Clara softened her voice. "Caleb, sweetheart, go to Mrs. Alvarez's wagon. Do not run. Walk like you are carrying a full cup." The child obeyed, trembling. Step by step, he crossed the muddy street. Jonah did not breathe until Caleb reached the wagon and a woman pulled him down behind it. Then Rafe grabbed Clara. His hand closed around her arm, hard enough to bruise. Jonah took a step. "I said stay." Rafe dragged Clara backward toward the alley. "You come after me. She dies first." Clara looked at Jonah once. In his face she saw terror, fury, and something else he had never said. Something that broke through the stone and reached for her with both hands. But he did not charge. He gave her the only thing that might save her. He trusted her courage. Rafe pulled her into the alley. The mud was deep there, the walls close, the smell of whiskey and rot rising from old barrels. He shoved her ahead of him toward the rear of the saloon, where a saddled horse waited. "Where is the gray man?" he demanded. "I saw him go toward the livery." "When?" "The day the satchel disappeared." His grip tightened. "Name?" "I heard someone call him Mr. Bellamy." Rafe cursed. So there was a Bellamy. The guess landed somewhere real. Clara's mind moved quickly now, the way it did when an oven burned too hot and 5 trays needed saving. Rafe wanted the ledger because it connected names. The satchel held bonds or certificates. The gray man had some part in it. Rafe feared betrayal more than law. "Judge, you have the satchel," she said. Rafe shoved her against the saloon wall. "Shut up, but not the whole fortune." His eyes answered before his mouth could hide it. The satchel had not been enough. Behind Rafe, beyond the alley mouth, a shadow moved along the roof line. Jonah, Clara kept her eyes on Rafe. The ledger tells where the rest is. Pike should have burned it. Pike hid it because he knew you would kill him. Rafe lifted the pistol. You talk too much? Only because you are listening. The roof shadow dropped. Jonah came down behind Rafe like canyon rock breaking loose. He struck Rafe's gun arm just as the pistol fired. The shot went wild, blasting splinters from a barrel. Clara ducked. Rafe and Jonah slammed into the mud, rolling hard against the saloon wall. Rafe fought like a trapped wolf. He drove an elbow into Jonah's cut forearm. Jonah grunted but held on. Clara saw the pistol skid near her boot. She picked it up. Her hands shook. The gun felt heavier than iron, heavier than shame, heavier than every choice that had led her here. Stop, she said. The men froze. Rafe looked up from the mud and laughed through blood on his teeth. You won't shoot? Clara pointed the pistol at the ground beside his head and fired. The blast cracked through the alley. Rafe went white. I baked bread, she said, voice trembling now. I did not say I was helpless. Jonah stared at her for one stunned second, then twisted Rafe's arms behind him as Sheriff Vale and two men rushed into the alley. When it was over, when Rafe was bound and cursing, when the ledger was back in the sheriff's coat and Caleb was sobbing into Jonah's side, Clara stepped away from the crowd and leaned against the rain barrel because her legs no longer trusted the earth. Jonah came to her. Are you hurt? She looked at the bruise forming on her arm. Not badly. His face changed when he saw it, not with pity, with pain he could not put anywhere. I should have kept you from him. You kept Caleb alive. You offered yourself. So did you. Rain ran from the brim of his hat. The street behind him had gone quiet. Everyone was watching again. But this time the silence was different. Clara became aware of the pistol still in her hand. She lowered it. Sheriff Vale approached, pale but steady. Miss Bell, you might have saved 3 lives and broken open a crime I have chased for years. Mrs. Harrow stood nearby, wet and shivering. Mud streaked her skirt. Her eyes moved from Clara to Rafe to the watching town. For once, she seemed unsure which story would protect her best. Vale opened the ledger. Rafe kept account of who helped move the stolen bonds, who bought silence, and who meant to claim the mining certificates when the rail spur came through. Silas Crane's name is here. So is Harrow Mercantile. A murmur ran through the crowd. Mrs. Harrow's mouth opened, closed. Silas tried to run. 2 ranch hands caught him before he reached the livery. The hidden fortune, it turned out, was larger than cash. The satchel Rafe had stolen held payroll bonds, yes, but also certificates to Canyon mineral rights, purchased years earlier in the name of a dead investor. The ledger showed how Rafe, Silas, and Mrs. Harrow had hidden the documents, waiting for the railroad to raise the land value. Abner Pike had tried to sell the secret and paid with his life. And Miss Bell? Jonah asked. Vale looked at Clara. Miss Bell was used as a curtain. Accuse a poor woman loudly enough, and folks stopped looking at rich lies. The words settled over the street. Clara had imagined vindication before, in small bitter moments while scrubbing pans. She had imagined Mrs. Harrow exposed, Silas shamed, the town forced to see. But now that the moment had come, it did not feel like triumph. It felt like exhaustion, like setting down a sack she had carried so long her bones had grown around it. Jonah took off his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The gesture was simple, public, undeniable. No one laughed. But the sacrifice came the next morning. The stolen documents named several land sections, including water rights along the upper canyon. Jonah had unknowingly leased part of that range for years. With the case reopened, claims would be frozen. Cattle could not graze there until court settled ownership. Without that pasture, Jonah might lose half his herd before winter. Sheriff Vale told him in the ranch yard, hat in hand. I'm sorry, Jonah. Law is law. You helped find this. I wish it did not cut you. Jonah looked toward the pasture where cattle moved like dark stones under the gray sky. That herd was not wealth to him. It was Caleb's future, his brother's legacy, the roof, the flour, the wages he had promised Clara. Clara heard from the porch. Her heart sank. After Vale left, she found Jonah in the barn, repairing a bridle that did not need repair. "You should send me back," she said. The leather creaked in his hands. "No, you might not be able to pay wages. Then, I will owe you honest. That is not enough when winter comes." He set the bridle down. "Do you think I regret helping you because it cost me grass? No, that is what frightens me." He turned. Clara stood just inside the barn doors, sunlight pale behind her. "I have been a burden dressed as need before. Men help, then count the costs, then make a woman pay in silence. I will not become another debt in your house." Jonah crossed the barn slowly. "You are not a debt. You do not know what I am." "Yes," he said, "I know." Her eyes filled despite her effort. He stopped a few feet away. "You are the woman who made my nephew eat when grief had closed his throat. You are the woman who stood before a gun because a child was afraid. You are the woman who starts again when the crock is broken. If winter comes hard, then we meet it with bread, beans, and whatever stubbornness you have taught the dough." A tear slipped down her cheek. He looked at it as if it hurt him. "I cannot promise ease, Clara. I have no fine house, no gentle pass, and less range than I had yesterday. I am afraid most days I am not enough for Caleb. I am afraid of wanting what can be taken," she whispered. "So am I." His hand lifted, then stopped. He would not take what she had not offered. Clara saw the restraint, the respect, the waiting. Slowly she placed her hand in his, not a confession, not yet, but a beginning neither of them hid from. Honor did not return to Clara in one grand sweep. It came in pieces, like warmth returning to fingers after cold. It came when Sheriff Vale posted a notice clearing her name of theft and naming her as a material witness in the Dutton case. It came when Mrs. Harrow's store closed pending investigation, and no bread smoked from its ovens. It came when women who had once crossed the street to avoid Clara began arriving at the ranch road with empty baskets and awkward eyes. "Could you bake for the church supper?" one asked. Clara looked at the woman until the woman dropped her gaze. "We were wrong," she said. Clara did not answer quickly. Forgiveness, like bread, could not be forced to rise faster by staring. At last she said, "I will bake if payment is fair and if my name is written on the order." The woman nodded. "Yes, Miss Bell, that name, spoken with care," followed Clara back to the kitchen and stayed with her all day. The railroad case moved through the county court. Rafe Dutton confessed enough to hang others with him, though he blamed every evil on greed that was not his own. Silas Crane lost his land claim, and most of his friends, which hurt him more. Mrs. Harrow tried to call herself deceived, but the ledger held numbers in her hand. The hidden fortune was recovered in stages. Bonds sewn into a mattress, certificates sealed in a flour barrel at the mercantile, gold notes hidden beneath loose bricks behind the Red Lantern stove. Some of it belonged to the rail company, some to heirs back east, some became reward money. When Sheriff Vale rode to Jonah's ranch with the official letter, Clara was hanging wash, and Jonah was splitting wood. Caleb ran ahead of the sheriff, shouting as if the envelope were Christmas. Vale dismounted with a careful smile. "Reward's been approved." Jonah wiped his brow. "For you, for Miss Bell, primarily. Her testimony and identification wrote the case. There is also compensation for your frozen range and assistance in the capture." Clara stared at the envelope he held out. "I don't understand." Val's smile deepened. "You found the thread they pulled, Miss Bell. Law says that matters." Her hands were damp from wash water. She wiped them on her apron before taking the letter. The amount written inside made the yard tilt. It was not the full hidden fortune, not fairy tale wealth. But it was enough to pay wages, buy flour, repair the smokehouse, replace lost grazing, and give Clara something she had not held in years. Choice. Caleb bounced on his toes. Can we buy cinnamon? Clara laughed then. It surprised everyone, including herself. The sound rose clear in the yard, startling a hen from beneath the porch. Jonah looked at her as if he would remember that laugh until his last breath. Yes, she said, we can buy cinnamon by late autumn. Canyon Ridge changed because it had to. The Red Lantern was sold at lawful auction to a widow named Mrs. Alvarez, who turned it into a boarding house and dining room where no gambling was allowed, and no woman was mocked for eating alone. Clara leased the kitchen on Saturdays. Her bread brought miners, ranch hands, mothers, stage drivers, and eventually even those who had once laughed in the street. She did not make it easy for them. Easy was not the same as good. When Mrs. Harrow, awaiting trial and stripped of her store, sent a written apology through Sheriff Vale, Clara read it once and placed it in the stove. Not from cruelty, from freedom. Some papers did not deserve to be kept. The torn bride letter she treated differently. One evening, after the first frost silvered the ranch roof, Clara took the pieces from her Bible and carried them to the hearth. Jonah sat at the table, mending Caleb's harness strap for his wooden horse. Caleb slept in the side room, one hand curled around a new toy wagon Jonah had carved. Clara knelt by the fire. Jonah watched quietly. You sure? She looked at the torn promise. The ink faded where rain and tears had touched it. For a long time, I thought this proved someone once wanted me, she said. Then I thought it proved I had been unwanted. Now it proves neither. She placed the pieces into the flame. They curled black at the edges, glowed, and vanished. Jonah came to stand beside her. What proves it now? Clara looked around the room. Bread cooling on the shelf. Caleb's slate on the table. Jonah's coat hanging beside her shawl. Apples simmering with cinnamon on the stove. A house once bare, now breathing. I do, she said. He nodded. Ah, yes. The word was rough, reverent. Winter came early to the canyon. Snow fell first on the high rim, then crept down into the cedar draws. The frozen range case settled in Jonah's favor with compensation enough to buy feed. Clara's reward helped build a proper bakehouse beside the ranch kitchen, with a brick oven, a wide worktable, and a sign Caleb painted with crooked letters. Bell's Canyon Bread. Underneath, in smaller letters, Jonah carved, honest weight, honest work. The first day it opened, half the town came. Clara stood behind the counter in a blue dress she had bought with her own money. Flour dusted her sleeves as always, but now it looked less like hardship and more like a mark of her calling. Caleb carried rolls to customers with solemn pride. Jonah stacked firewood near the oven, pretending not to notice every man who glanced too long at Clara. Sheriff Vale bought 2 loaves and whispered, "Best justice this town has seen." Near noon, Silas Crane appeared at the edge of the yard. Conversation thin. He looked smaller than Clara remembered, though perhaps he had always been small and she had only grown. His hat was crushed in his hands. Shame had found him at last, but it did not make him kinder, only quieter. "I came to say," he began, then stopped. His eyes flicked toward Jonah, who stood by the woodpile, still as a loaded rifle. Clara came around the counter and stepped into the yard. Silas swallowed. "I was wrong. Yea," Clara said. "I should not have spoken as I did. No, I suppose you think yourself fortunate now." Clara looked past him to the canyon road, to the town beyond, to all the miles that had brought her to this place. "No, I think myself honest, employed, and loved by a child who needs another roll before he steals one." Caleb, caught with his hand near the basket, froze. A few people laughed softly. not at Clara, but with relief that the world could hold gentleness again. Silas flushed. "And Reed?" Clara looked toward Jonah. He was not smiling. Jonah rarely wasted smiles where watchfulness would do, but his eyes were on her with a steadiness that had become more precious than any speech. "Mr. Reed," Clara said, "has never asked me to be grateful for respect." Silas had no answer to that. He left with his apology unfinished, and Clara found she did not need the rest of it. That evening, after the customers were gone and the bakehouse swept, snow began to fall in soft white flakes. Canyon Ridge turned quiet under it. The cliffs rose red and white beyond the ranch, holding the last light of day. Smoke lifted from the chimney in a straight gray ribbon. Clara stood on the porch with a shawl around her shoulders, watching Caleb chase snowflakes with his tongue in the yard. Jonah came out beside her. For a while they simply stood. "I have something to ask," he said. Her heart moved before her body did. "About bread?" "No, about Caleb, in part." She looked at him then. He removed his hat, though snow landed in his hair. His hands were bare, work rough and steady except for the thumb moving once against his palm. "I told myself, I brought you here because you needed work," he said. "Then I told myself Caleb needed you. Then the house. Then the ranch. I made every excuse a fearful man can make." Clara's throat tightened. Jonah continued, voice low. "The truth is, I need you. Not to cook, not to mend, not to stand between us and loneliness like it is another chore. I need you because when you are here, I remember that a life can be more than surviving what it lost." Snow melted on Clara's lashes. "I cannot offer a life without hardship," he said. "You know the land, you know me. I am slow with words and poor at ease. But I would give you my name if you wanted it, and keep yours honored beside it. I would stand with you in town, in church, in storm, in hunger, in whatever comes. Not because I pity what happened to you, because I love who you are." Clara looked at the man before her. Canyon, hard, grief-marked, gentle in the places that mattered most. She thought of the day he had found her in the street and had not called her poor thing. He had bought bread. He had offered work. He had waited for her courage instead of taking its place. "You expected only an overlooked baker," she whispered. His eyes warmed. "I was a fool. And what did you find?" "A fortune no satchel could hold." The answer broke something open in her, not with pain this time, but with light. Caleb stopped in the yard. "Are you asking her, Uncle Jonah?" Jonah kept his eyes on Clara. "Trying to. You have to say the question." A laugh trembled out of Clara. Jonah's mouth softened. He took her hand, not hiding the gesture from the child, the yard, the road, or the town beyond it. "Clara Bell," he said, "will you marry me and make this home with us?" She looked down at their joined hands. His was warm around hers, not gripping, not claiming, holding. "Yes," she said, "but I keep baking under my own sign." His smile came then, rare and full. "I would expect nothing less." Caleb shouted and ran to them, throwing his arms around both their waists. Jonah pulled him close with one arm and Clara with the other. For a moment, the three of them stood tangled together on the porch while snow fell around the lantern light. The wedding took place 2 weeks before Christmas in the dining room that had once been the Red Lantern Saloon. Mrs. Alvarez hung cedar boughs over the windows. Sheriff Vale stood as witness. Caleb carried a small pillow with 2 plain rings tied by ribbon. The whole town came, some out of love, some out of repentance, and some because history was changing shape before their eyes. Clara walked in wearing the blue dress, a winter shawl, and no veil to hide her face. No one whispered rejected bride. No one said damaged goods. When Jonah took her hand before the preacher, he did it where every person could see. The vows were simple. The kiss was gentle. Caleb cried openly and denied it afterward with great dignity. At the supper, Clara's bread filled every table. There were apple pies made from sour ranch apples, topped sweet with brown sugar, patience, and cinnamon. Men, who had once laughed outside the saloon, now removed their hats when Clara passed. Women asked for her recipes and her forgiveness with the same nervous humility. Clara gave receipts more readily. Forgiveness, she decided, would rise in its own time. Near the end of the evening, Jonah led her outside. Snow had stopped. The canyon shone beneath the moon, quiet and immense. From inside came fiddle music, low conversation. Caleb's sleepy voice, asking for one more slice of pie. Jonah held out his hand. Clara looked at it, then at the street where shame had once pinned her in dust. She placed her hand in his. Together they walked back through the open door, not quickly, not hidden, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two people who had chosen each other with clear eyes. The lanterns warmed the windows, bread cooled on the tables. A child waited by the hearth, and outside the old saloon, where a forgotten woman had once been judged by every wrong measure, the snow covered the last tracks of her shame, while the whole town watched her come home.